Welcome to Conversations with Dez. I'm your host, Dez Blanchfield. The year that was 2021 is over, and not a moment too soon for some of us. Much of it was a repeat of the 2020 experience, as the world faced continued challenges directly and indirectly related to the COVID-19 global pandemic. A new wave of lockdowns with the Delta strain, and now, as a new year in 2022 begins, we have the emergence of the B.1.1.529 strain of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, aka Omicron. Businesses faced continued challenges from the usual suspects, ranging from human resource and remote working through to data management and data protection, with a continued onslaught of ransomware and cybersecurity attacks, with an average of 1,400 hacking incidents per day in Q4 of 2021 alone. I'm joined today by Manoj Nair, General Manager of Metallic, of the SaaS-based cloud data management company, a Commvault Venture. Manoj, this has surely been a year like no other as far as 2021 is concerned, and now the new year in 2022. For you and your customers and business partners, what's it been like out there in the front line, as it were, supporting your customers and the partner ecosystem through the year that was 2021 in particular, and what does it look like going forward in 2022?
Des, it's great to be with you here again, talking after a while. And like you were saying, it's a year like no other. It felt like one blended year from 2020 for a lot of us. And our customers really, one of the big things that we are seeing from a Metallic and data management as a service perspective really is around the topic of security. So while the world is going through all of this pandemic and multiple waves that we've been living through, the bad guys are never to let a good moment go to waste. As you said, have been prolific. I lived through nation-state attacks, back in the day when I was at RSA, and here we are. All those techniques have been mainstreamed, and really ransomware is front and center. And what we're seeing from our perspectives and our customers is this data management and data management as service is really becoming part of a security conversation now. So for long, data management was in protection considered, something you do for compliance, maybe for the occasional you lose a file and you need it. I think these trends have really forced it to be part of a conversation where every CISO needs to ask the question, what does my last mile of defense look like? And, or get out of jail free card, as one of the CISOs recently told me. To be that, you need to be an active system. You cannot be just a passive, I'm going to back it up, I got software, appliances, and all that. So how does an active system work? And how does an active system really stay up to date with the latest threats? Log4j, these are words that no one knew about till the end of December, 2021. And then, you got internet memes all over. What it really does is now you've got all these attack techniques that are mainstreaming. And so that's one of the big changes we're seeing is it's really heightened the sense of what is my data, which is my crown jewel, look like from an active recovery perspective. So that's one is probably the biggest ones that we have seen from a Metallic business perspective. And there's some, evidence points, to that. We launched a managed services program for Metallic. And Software One, who I'll talk about here in a minute, was our design partner. But we also last year heard from a managed security service provider, GMSecTech, one of 23 PCI forensic labs in the world. And these guys are, being in the middle of these ransomware recoveries, seeing that customers have the backup system failing. And so they come and that becomes their reason to find a data management, data protection vendor as a service that can be an integral part of their security offering. And so, it's really the need for a proactive approach, an active defense, thinking about concepts like, do I have an air gap copy? Is this constantly updated? Is someone else, is it in a different network? Then, the bad guys want to go after the exit paths. I often say that. Don't put it inside your environment. How about if it's completely separate from your environment? And so those are the kinds of topics we're really seeing if I go back to our first conversation almost a few years ago now, I think that's that big difference that we're seeing in the kind of conversation we're having with partners and customers.
I imagine that leading up to 2020, you would have had a lot of organizations who were relatively comfortable in that they had some infrastructure in place and some cybersecurity capabilities, and were predominantly in a reactive sense, operational sense, where if something happens, we'll respond to it. In 2020, we had obviously the emergence of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, and organizations had to stop physically working in retail or restaurant or hospitality and tourism sort of spaces. They had to go online. They had to rapidly adopt SaaS-based solutions or cloud-based solutions in various ways for their operational thing, their e-commerce, their online websites, and sometimes had to take shortcuts unknowingly sometimes, and security issues arrived there. When we got to 2021, did you see a shift in cultural behavior in enterprises going from a reactive mode to more of a proactive mode and seeking you out to say, as you said before, we don't know where our risks are. We need to prepare for it. We need to plan for it. We need to start assuming that we're going to have risks rather than what we might have done previously, which is if something happens, we'll respond to it.
I think we do see that there's in two ways, right? They're proactive about their cloud journey and digital transformation. If CIOs needed a tipping point moment, 2020 wasn't, right? So there's no going back from that. And now it doesn't mean everything goes to public cloud or SaaS. The world will be a sustained hybrid mode for a long time, and we've got edge computing and a lot of data everywhere. But they're being more proactive in that sense of saying, look, we had to do a bunch of things in an emergency, but let's now take that momentum forward and saying, what is the natural, where does which workload belong? Do some of these workloads even belong to us in terms of managing that workload versus using a SaaS workload? And being a SaaS data protection service, that's certainly something that, we became part of that conversation. If you have workload sprawl, it's really unfortunately the worst case from a security and risk management perspective, because now you've got the Swiss cheese and all the light that can go through the Swiss cheese, because you got, okay, I got workload here, workload there. I don't have a comprehensive recovery strategy. So that's the other aspect. We see them getting more proactive. I've talked to CISO after CISO. We had Dave Martin, the CISO of ADP, at our Connections conference, which is our customer event, a few months ago. And Dave's point is maybe CISOs like me probably didn't even know who managed their backup back, maybe going back a year plus ago. That's no longer the case. They're asking questions. They're asking about, the business resilience conversation is so intricately tied to data that from a risk management and a CISO perspective is the other aspect, that they're being very proactive, very conscious, and asking the question if the old approaches really even make sense in the new world. And so both of these are trends we see in our customer and partner conversations quite a bit.
One other thing that a lot of organizations, and I have the privilege of sitting on quite a number of boards myself, the topic of data protection often comes up, and it gets split into two areas. It gets split into the cybersecurity and ransomware type attacks and hacking things, but it also gets split into this whole data sovereignty, data locality, compliance and regulatory challenge now, and that is that we have to know where our data is. We have to know what treatments it's getting. We have to know who's got access to it. Did you also see organizations come to you not just for the cybersecurity strengths and capabilities you got to protect the data, back it up, restore it, and an air gap potentially, but did you also see an uptick in organizations with data regulatory requirements, whether it's merger and acquisitions, whether it's increased uptake in cloud-based services where a lot of data is now being moved into there that wasn't already there? Was that a trend you saw see at the end of 2020 and 2021, where organizations took a lot more interest in where their data was for that regulatory and compliance side of things as well?
Absolutely. I think cloud, one of the things that prevent cloud adoption is data gravity. And that's historically been the case. Now, with tools like us that make that easier in terms of adoption of clouds and really thinking about the resilience and protection of clouds, then becomes a question: if I'm adopting certain SaaS service, certain cloud service, what am I responsible for? And the global, climate around data regulations and laws are also constantly changing. That's very much in the press. People are hearing about it. The regulations are becoming more and more clearer, but also with more teeth. And it's not just GDPR. You've got state regulations in the US. You've got various countries around the world now understand the risks of data potentially outside their borders, and really want to control that. So that is absolutely part. It has influenced our roadmap, and it has influenced how we think about. If you had asked me, Dez, a few years ago, would Metallic be in 31 plus countries in less than 2 years? I probably have said no way. We'll stay focused, maybe 5-6 countries. That's an impact, partly because of the need for having presence in those geographies. It's not just launching it and making it available. It's thinking about local compliance issues. There's various sub-regions in a country like United Arab Emirates that have different laws. Various verticals have different laws. So that's a active customer conversation. And the last part I would add is customers now understanding that the right data protection solution help them be prepared for those questions. So where is this user's data? Well, what's the one place in the enterprise where all your data comes together? It's, if you have an enterprise grade data management and data protection service, it's there. Well, is it searchable? Can I, is there an index? Can I find out all instances of Dez's data? And so you're an Australian citizen and you got, ACPI and these regulations. If somebody asks the company saying, Dez has a subject matter request, find all data about him, most companies may or may not be in a good place to answer that. So that's the kind of, questions we're starting to see, as the additional value prop of actually adopting a service that's enterprise grade and global.
Indeed, and in many ways, the pandemic is essentially a sort of a trend line that I can often correlate against data, and that is that we've got a whole bunch of human-related health challenges we want to continue to work through, cleansing environments and providing protection through masks and whatnot. I sort of look at that as an analogy of what we needed to do with our data, perhaps pre-pandemic, but it certainly gave rise to a need for it, because in the same way that this pandemic doesn't appear to be going away any day soon, certainly the increase in diligent attention being paid and more stringent laws and controls around data protection and regulatory compliance in countries is simply going to continue to grow as people are more and more concerned with the data privacy or data protection. And you mentioned a couple of interesting things there, and certainly I wanted to just circle back on one of those. I mean, Metallic has enjoyed a number of really key milestones over the last year or so, in particular the rollout through new regions worldwide, including India. And as you mentioned, some 30 odd countries, I think you said. I wonder if you could walk us through those and give us some insight into what the response has been like so far in the new regions and how the market's reacted to now being able to leverage your Metallic offering to address the types of critical data protection challenges we've been talking about.
Yeah, no, we've had quite, if you think about it as an extended 2-year period, it's been full of momentum. And if I just look at 2021 and just the portfolio expansion from a verticals perspective, use cases, or kind of geographical expansion that you're talking about, we've done quite a bit. We just talked about SaaS data protection. And really understanding that there is a need for a true enterprise grade offering that doesn't almost like no workload left behind. What is there a solution out there that allows you to protect your SaaS workloads, your on-prem workloads, your public cloud workloads, and your endpoints, and your physical servers, and your edge locations? The data is everywhere. All that data is relevant. So that's been kind of our big focus, is really a comprehensive portfolio that leverages kind of that core Commvault history and IP and market leading strength to be able to offer that kind of portfolio for our customers. Like, I call it the first enterprise grade data management as a service. And to that extent, you think about SaaS apps. A lot of customers now understand the shared responsibility model there. And we expanded, our O365 support, which we launched with back in late 2019. We added this past year Dynamics 365 and Salesforce, two leading SaaS providers. We're in fact the only vendor that supports all three Microsoft clouds. plus Salesforce, the CRM solution that the whole world uses. You think about the nature of critical data that any business has in their CRM or in the Dynamics suite. Your O365 data dwarfs in comparison to the enterprise value of that. So that was an expansion that we were particularly proud of. Hybrid support is key. It's not just for SaaS workloads, because as you move to the cloud, you're looking at, our customers use us to protect their Azure data lake. They use us now. Late December, we added AWS support, and a lot of and it's not just infrastructure on AWS. It's their PaaS services, RDS. So you look at all the different kind of services a cloud native workload adds. We added that. We added enterprise on-prem workloads. Oracle, a lot of customers, massive global footprint, have very mission critical data in there. SAP HANA. So, we added on-prem databases, and finally, this I just mentioned earlier, Software One, and our ability to take all of that and wrap it with a managed service. If you're working with a managed service provider who's managing your infrastructure on your behalf, or is helping you migrate to the cloud, how can this data protection just be a capability that is built into that MSP? And we use Software One as a design partner. We launched it in July, and since then we launched our MSP program. Today, Metallic is available in 31 countries directly through us, but it's available in 115 countries through our network of MSPs. And that is the global availability, that really amazing pull on all geos. I'll leave you with one stat, Des, that I'm very proud of. Every service and every country we've launched has reached six-figure within weeks of them actually launching. So at least in my career, I've not seen anything where the momentum and the impact is so immediate. Now, some of it comes with planning, and some of it is just the absolute timing and the need in the market.
And indeed, and those results are astounding, and congratulations to you and your team and the Commvault family as a whole on that. With the new year now in 2022, the C-suite in particular, the CEOs, CIOs are nervously watching the horizon, hoping to keep ahead of the next big thing that might trip them up, as they have witnessed countless ransomware and cybersecurity attacks, and particularly data breaches that impacted their peers around the globe. Where do you think the C-suite in particular, should be focusing their efforts and investments now in 2022, at the start of this year, to ensure that they're well positioned to deal with the myriad of potential threats to their organizations as the world continues to deal with the pandemic threat, as well as the commercial data related and data protection threats, and I guess a seemingly unending list of challenges and uncertainty?
Yeah, no, look, it's a continuation of what has been a big focus over the last few years, right? So digital transformation and the rising tide of ransomware and attacks, and then you add to that potential of insider attacks. These are the kinds of things that are on top of the mind of any C-suite, or boards now looking at it from a brand perspective. So from a data management, data protection perspective, I would say that one of the big things, I mentioned this earlier, data has gravity. Now that the cloud adoption has taken off, now there's a cloud gravity for that data. So now you've got all this, very important enterprise data in the cloud, and thinking through that, really thinking about a solution that is designed for that age rather than a solution that's trying to catch up for that age. And asking the right questions. Is it a platform for the future? Is it comprehensive? Is it going to protect my new workloads and not leave my existing investment behind? That's and really thinking about the fact that data can be everywhere. So how do I get something easy yet comprehensive, right? So finding that match is a key question that I believe should be on the top of the agenda for everyone. Data is what makes a company today. Every organization is digital, and that data that they have about the history, the IP, their customers. And so in this, kind of that, it's kind of a pivot on that data gravity. Now it's gravity on the other side, now that the clouds are taking traction. And then the other part with cloud traction is truly understanding the shared responsibility model. I cannot say this often enough. but there's a number of times that I talk to, CISOs and others who have really not, sometimes it's like, it's human nature. You want to listen to what, you think is true. This looks good. It feels good. And it's, the pitch is great. And sometimes you adopt it in the middle of an emergency and you haven't thought it through. But now is the time because, talking to, cyber insurance providers, for example, they're increasingly seeing that data being something that has become a soft underbelly. We've seen a lot of, public high profile breaches about, exposed S3 buckets and other things. But there's a lot more that happens that, you need to think about that shared responsibility model. And finally thinking about that managed service partner, right? If you do not have the expertise, if you have the size of an organization, in fact, I would say any sized organization, think about who are your strategic partners, whether it is from a security services perspective or digital transformation, and what tools are they bringing to the table? Not just one-time expertise and people, but sustained tools that are part of their arsenal that will allow them to add value to your organization. So I would say those are things that come top of the mind, Dez, in terms of top three things that organizations need to think about for this year.
Are you seeing a shift in the trend with regard to who's taking interest in what Metallic can bring to the table? I know obviously CISOs are very excited because you can bring a whole range of digital asset protection and security to it. CIOs are very excited because they can now consume backup as a service in many ways. I know a lot of chief risk officers are excited because now they've got a bunch of tools available to them, world-leading tools in over 30 countries that they can use to meet their regulatory and compliance needs, or whether it's internal or external or state or federal government, whatever. But I imagine there's other parts of the organization now looking at this with great interest as well, and that might include the likes of the CFO, who are seeing a potential reduction in operational cost in investing in implementing a solution based on your platform and capabilities, where over time they're going to continue to get increased cost savings and increased business benefits that relate to some of their most critical assets being their cyber assets. Is that a shift you're seeing as well, where the other parts of the business now paying attention and seeing the value and looking at, well, I can now find all my cyber assets, all my data, all my files, and then I can actually potentially put a value on those and put them on the balance sheet and place KPIs on them and manage them, as opposed to before not quite knowing what was behind door number 2 as long as it was backed up.
Yeah, no, we interestingly see, being a data management as a service fundamentally has lifted the profile. And when we see any size of, a mid-size or large enterprise, there's not a single conversation that we have that a security team is not involved. So it's not just your director of IT and CIO team, but you got the CISO's team. Financial teams are involved because they see the TCO benefit that we have. As you just go to like metallic.io, and we have TCO calculators. What it'll show you is what all do you pay for just in your data protection stack. And you're paying for backup, you're paying for the software, you're paying for networking, storage, the administrators who have to keep up that whole stack. And so obviously from a CFO perspective, when they look at it from a TCO lens, all of a sudden they go, we get a better solution that consolidates the pieces that we don't need to be responsible for. And finally, the business, a lot of times the business stakeholders are the ones that are bringing up the question. And we have CROs who ask about, hey, where is my Salesforce data protected? They read the news, they look at this stuff and they go, do I have business resilience? So we absolutely, changing that nature of who all that you talk to. It is no longer, kind of just the core persona might still be, the folks that always are responsible for the data protection stack, but they have an amazing, powerful weapon in their hand, but in terms of being able to answer these questions from multiple stakeholders.
I've seen a significant uptake in, subscription to not only fundamentally powerful tools such as your Metallic offering and various Commvault offerings, but also now the adoption of the use of managed service providers in some form, where an organization may realize that managing cloud, managing data, managing that security isn't their core business. So they go and they adopt a solution such as Metallic to provide that foundational capability. And then they also bring in their other managed service providers to help them integrate some of the other things they might already be doing. Are you seeing, particularly in the cloud space, obviously, this trend of an increased use and adoption and integration of managed service providers who are bringing additional value to it within the ecosystem? Because I know you've got a number of partners and integrators and resellers in your normal Commvault ecosystem. I imagine they're seeing an uptake in interest in not just Commvault as a service, but also the fully integrated capability that MSPs can bring to this as part of some other initiative they might be running or some other business program.
Yeah, no, this is exactly why we launched Metallic MSP in 2021, and we went through a deep pilot. We came out and really there, I would say there's a kind, whether it is, SIs or cloud leaning or managed service providers who are cloud leaning, they're part of a digital transformation, so sometimes they're referred to as CSPs or cloud SPs. And they are especially ones that see a lot of value in something like a Metallic being part of their service. And so we're definitely seeing customers now more conscious because the cloud providers themselves have a network and ecosystem of these cloud leaning MSPs helping customers through that cloud transformation journey. We're also seeing security. So Software One was a great example of that. That was our design partner, but that wasn't the only one. So when we launched, we had multiple other partners. And then the security service providers. That's the other angle that is very interesting for us, is how they are starting to adopt GM SecTech's good example that I mentioned. And for them, it's an extension of their security stack and capabilities. And I would be remiss in not pointing out that part of what we have done has gone beyond recovery from an attack to being more proactive about detection. We launched something called Security IQ. Security IQ really gives all of our customers, any Metallic customer, a lens into what might be happening with their primary data, not just their backup data. Are there latent ransomware in your OneDrive? Or is there activity happening in your primary file system that maybe an indicator of compromise before it strikes, and then what happens when something happens? So those are, now you think about capability like that, and a managed security service provider that can actually be the eyes on glass on that, and you finally found like a great combination. So now this is no longer sitting in a silo in data protection; it is integrated into your security stack and set of capabilities. So those are the kinds of partnerships that we're really activated in 2021, and will continue this year.
Yeah, indeed. And I think if there's one thing that I would love our audience to do is to consider where they are right now as a point in time and say, well, with the new year in 2022, there's a whole range of human-related and social-related challenges we're going to face. We need to focus on those. We need to invest in those. We need to be able to go to sleep at night knowing that our data assets, our cyber assets are all protected and looked after, and that we can ask some deep questions about where it is and who's doing what with it, and actually start those conversations with you and your team and your partners, your resellers, integrators in your ecosystem, and actually fill in those gaps of knowledge where if they can't hand on heart say they know where all the data is it protected? Is it backed up? Can they restore it? Can they restore it in the right region, in the right way? Who's treating it? They should be having those conversations now, proactively, as you said, as opposed to reactively when potentially something goes wrong. Because the interesting thing is I'm finding that a lot of people don't know something's gone wrong for a long time. And when they do find out, it's just far too late in the office. And sometimes the businesses don't recover. Well, you've given us some great insights there, Manoj, and it's always great to catch up with you. And I really appreciate you sharing your lens into the year that was 2021 last year and beyond with what was happening in 2020. I wonder if we could now just wrap up briefly with some of your thoughts around what 2022 now will bring as we look forward to this year, particularly for CEOs and CIOs, and I guess CISOs as well, given they're very much in the context of this, and what they need to be focused on and where they should invest time, both in the boardroom and developing strategy and roadmaps and planning, through to actually putting things into operational status, and what might be likely some of the challenges through this year that they should be considering, that based on your role. You've got a very amazing role. You've got a very broad view of the world, but you also go very deep. C-suite, CISOs in particular, CEOs, what should they be doing at boardroom level as far as strategy and planning and roadmaps go for this year, do you think, in your mind? And what would you like them to be investing time in and potentially having conversations with you around how to better prepare for this year and some of the unknowns that they may not have expected that may catch them out?
Yeah, I think just starting with the world that we live in, right? The uncertainty that we live in continues, unfortunately. But by now, I think saying that we weren't prepared for it is no longer going to be acceptable, right? So they have to plan for there's this concept called anti-fragile, and it's not just resilience. Resilience means you can't break something. Anti-fragile is it keeps getting it gets better. So it's really think about that as a planning concept, saying if we continue in a world where we have continued uncertainty of different kinds, economic, social, health crisis, and you're constantly under attack. It's something that you got to think from a different lens, and it's really thinking about it from that. It's this Nicholas Taleb's book, I think, Anti-Fragile, but it's a concept that really resonates for me in terms of thinking through that business resilience. It really kind of has to go to a next level, and really think about what are your key assets, your people, your organizational data. How do you keep them productive in lots of different scenarios? It's upping the game. Software supply chain, these are words that no one probably knew until maybe late 2020. SolarWinds attack happens, and then this Log4j incident happens. The software supply chain is critical, that from a board level, to understand where are you sourcing all of your data, who are your providers of your software. Maybe that your trusted partner recommended a certain provider for whatever it is, but do you really is this really trusted, and how do you verify constantly? Or do you have enough shared risk with the partners you're working with? What are they doing for you that is better if they do it rather than you? So for an example in our case is being able to secure our customers and being able to tell them, with a matter of hours after the Log4j incident went public, versus every piece of on-prem software where the customer has to go and update it themselves. That's the kind of capabilities that you kind of start asking: are my vendors giving me real value for my money, versus this kind of best of breed, I'm just doing it because I always did it. And that's really some of the higher level things that I would say that people need to be thinking about.
Well, Manoj, it's always great to catch up with you, and it's fantastic to get some of the amazing insights that you yourself, in your role as general manager of Metallic, the SaaS-based cloud data management part of the Commvault family, can always give us. You've got an amazing lens on the world, amazing lens on business technology. Really appreciate your time today, and look forward to having you back on the show again soon.
Thank you, Des.